What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to do kind of a follow-up to yesterday's where we talked about budgets, we talked about Ratchet and Clank, some of the stuff that kind of made me upset. I want to go one step deeper, want to use a few extra things that we've learned through these leaks, and I want to make sure like we're all on the same freaking page here, okay? I am trying to be as respectful as I can on these leaks. Haven't talked about the Wolverine specific stuff. Obviously, the Insomniac personal data is terrible. And I'm just saying it for the few oddballs out there, which, to be fair, they can get lost. They don't have to watch these videos. But for the people saying, oh, Alex, you're covering the leaks, I'm trying to do it as invasive as I possibly can. I look at this, what we're about to talk about today. This is something that affects us daily as consumers buying these products. And I also find it interesting, and I also don't really think it hurts anything. Talking about the budget of a video game and how the budget is ballooning and you need to figure out a way to get it lower, that's not I think the most hateful, kind of thing I could make. You could definitely make worse. So just want to throw it out there. I know it's only a few people that I've seen having problems, and ultimately they don't have to watch these videos, right? I appreciate those that, giving me a chance and are being respectful. I'll give you respect as long as you give me respect. Okay. So where I want to take this is the idea about AA, selling games maybe for cheaper, doing more Miles Morales stuff, because we started talking about that with the Ratchet and Clank thing, right? And basically in that video I said, well, Ratchet did a break even. Obviously, actually after I made the video, it was found that, Ratchet did actually end up making money. So thank the Lord. Now, did it make a ton of money? No. And what I want to talk about right now is a little bit, different than that. So what we're talking about here is there was a specific part of the leak, again, just really going after personal stuff. It's removed from all that. But the idea that Spider-Man 3, right, is going to cost, a boatload. And even Spider-Man 2 cost an unbelievable amount of money. Now, I think it's also including, the Marvel cut and all this kind of stuff. But it cost an insane amount to make Spider-Man 2. Now, you could, on one side of things, say, why? Ultimately, why? And, going through Reddit, as I don't do all that often, but I do sometimes, it can be the worst place on Earth. It could also be sometimes really good. People were making good points. Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite games this year. Let me just throw it out. It's a top 10 game. I've played probably 40 to 50 new games that have released this year. This is in the top 20, 25% of them, okay? I want to say that. But when you look at Spider-Man 2 and you say, I believe it's 3 times the budget of Spider-Man 1. That's the numbers. Whatever the number, specific number is, it's 3 times. Why is it 3 times the size in terms of budget? Well, the answer, it's gotta be the employee's salary. And that's why, I hate when people get fired, when people get laid off from these jobs. And obviously the gaming industry has seen a lot of people get laid off this year. And it sucks. 95% of the time, sometimes, you kind of have it coming. If all you do is make bad products and you're not making money, what are they supposed to do with you? But in a lot of cases, as we've seen this year, it's not even because of you're not being productive. It's just we need to cut costs somewhere. There have been, some reports, some leaks that Insomniac maybe even got hit by, hey, we need to lay off 50 to 75 people. It's terrible. These are productive, good employees that get, slashed. Why? To save a couple extra million a year. Because if you think about it, as we keep saying, I've always used 100,000, right, as an average. And I think the number off the top of my head, without using a calculator, if you fired 50 people that all made an average of 100,000, you'd save 20, 25 million over a 5-year period. 4 years, I think it would be 20, 25. So you would save a pretty big chunk of money. So when you're talking about a game that costs, say, $300 million to make, you're thinking, well, if you have 400 employees that all make, game people that make video games, they get paid a lot of money, right? And as they should, because they're doing some very difficult stuff. They're making art. They're making it they're doing a lot, okay? I think they deserve it. So, but the point is, I think it's unsustainable. Not that you should fire them, not that you should pay them less, but where we're going in this video, okay? What do you do to stop it? When you see that Spider-Man 2 is 3 times the budget of Spider-Man 1, and to be honest, is it 3 times better? Is the jump 3 times more than Spider-Man 1? I don't think so. I would find it very hard to convince myself that this game is 3 times better than the first game. Okay, in some ways it is. In other ways, it took some steps back. So it's kind of maybe a net positive, but not 3 times, okay? And so you look at that and well, that's one side of it. But number 2, you can't keep doing this. This is what we talked about yesterday. especially if you're PlayStation. Like, as we've said, this is an industry issue, and it truly is. But PlayStation, because of these leaks, is obviously, under the microscope right now. You can't have these games costing $250, $350 million, and then they make $60, $70, $80 back. Now, it's actually a pretty well-known fact from the Sony ecosystem in the last decade or so that their net profit from things has always kind of been low. They actually have a critical issue or a problem with, they make money. In fact, they make a lot of money, but they spend so much that at the end of the day, again, if you're making a $350 million project and it doesn't even get you $100 million in profit, where does that fall? Well, I think it falls on it was too expensive, because it should make you more, and it did make a lot, but it costs so much to make. Does that make sense? Again, every situation, every company is slightly different. But the issue that I've had, and we talked about in the video and we're talking about here, this is an industry issue. Games cost a ton to make. And when that, the margin of error is so lit, you can't take risks. You can't make a game that costs $200 million. Even like a brand new AAA IP, how can you get one that's under $100 million? How? Now, like I said, it's got to be triple, because you can do AA or indie, but if you're doing, from Naughty Dog, the next even if it's a smaller game, they're taking a slight risk. It's not The Last of Us, it's not Uncharted, something, which, actually Naughty Dog is literally doing that. It's still going to cost between, what do you want to say, 150 to 200 million, which means that thing needs to sell 5-6 million units to make sure that they're okay. If for whatever reason, if God decides it's not going to happen that day, and the game sells 2 million, Sony just and we said this, right? But the issue is, well, Sony doesn't really have the luxury to do something like that. Now, maybe that's why they're doing live service. We talked about that too, right? If you have live service money just kind of flowing in, if you have some sort of that revenue stream, you can take more risks, because if something bombs now, you are actually in deep trouble. But if something bombs and you have all this extra money coming in from your 3 live service games, well, you might be okay, right? Now, okay, well, where does the AA stuff come in? Well, I don't know if it was a rumor, or if it was something that was reported, whatever it is. But the idea that, well, maybe you do something that's like a Miles Morales type thing. Maybe Miles Morales type games are almost the future. And those are most of the games. And then you have your live services, you have your you don't get rid of those, right? Those are still there. And you still have your ginormous, big AAA games that are huge, that are 40, 50, 60 hours, right? Now, I always say be as long as you need to be, but let's just give them our, marks. You can have those. But you kind of rest on, say, the Miles type game. There's been reports of Wolverine's length. There's been reports of what another Insomniac game's length is going to be. And a lot of these they're not that long. And now I'm fine with it. I am completely okay with it. The thing that's interesting, right? 2 kind of things. We said one, and I'm going to introduce a second thing. So the first thing that we already said, but I'll say it again, I don't know if people go for it, right? We're so conditioned to do something, we have to play games that are so long. If Miles Morales, what does that mean? Well, 10, 15 hours, right? A game that's 10, 15 hours. If that's the new norm, do people accept that? They probably don't, especially at $70. And in a way, I can get that. I'm still a very firm believer that quality is more than quantity, and if you have a good quality 10-hour game, I'll pay 70. I'll pay if you raise it to 80, if you do 60, because it's just is it worth the money? Everybody has their own type of worth, though, right? Worth for me could be different than worth for you. So something that's $70 worth for me might not be this. That's totally true. I definitely respect that. But I guess the new thing to throw in, and if you maybe have already caught this, you're waiting for me to say it, well, that's kind of what we already did. We'd almost be, in streaming, how streaming took over and killed, cable, but now streaming literally is cable, right? You need 7 subscriptions, which basically means you have cable back 20 years ago. I feel we've almost done that. We're almost there. Maybe 5 years now we will have done it in gaming. And what I mean by that is, 15 years ago, and we said this, right? 15 years, the Uncharteds of the world, the Sly Coopers, going back to my personal favorites. These are 10-hour games. These are 10-hour games charging full price at the time that it was, right? Whatever is Uncharted 60, whatever. That's what it was. Over time, we convinced ourselves, I think kind of wrongfully so, but it is what it is. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. We convinced ourselves that we need, in order to charge $60 or $70, you need a game that's 50 hours long. Somehow we got here, okay? But now they're too big. They're too long. Now I think there's like a quality issue there, and we've talked about that. But because of these budgets, you have these companies saying, like, we need to cut costs. That's what the rumor with Sony is. They're telling their developers, hey, like, you can't be doing this anymore. We can't. Now, maybe it's a Sony issue. But you know what? Halo Infinite, the reported budget for Halo Infinite was somewhere in like the $400 to $500 million range. That was the report, which is insane. The GTAs of the world, those have enormous budgets. So, is it a Sony-specific issue? Maybe they have a tougher time managing the budget of studios. Maybe they have a tougher time than others. But it's probably an industry, like, generally, right? Not all the time. There's examples of, say, Alan Wake 2. I think the reported budget, and get this, the reported budget for Alan Wake 2 is $50 million. The reported budget for Spider-Man 2 is like 253, whatever it is, right? So Alan Wake is like a fourth or a fifth of the cost of Spider-Man. And the thing is it all that, like, is the quality all that drastically lower for Alan? No. In fact, I think Alan Wake is a better game. That's my opinion. But even from a quality perspective, you might not like the kind of game that it is, but I think from a quality, Remedy does just as good of a job as anybody. The visuals, the sound, the feel. It doesn't feel like it's like a terrible game, right? And it's made for like a quarter of the cost. So you can do this for cheaper. And I think it's just you have to have smaller studios. Now, I'm not saying you have to like fire all these people. The other option is literally going down to those Miles Morales games. Now, again, the funny thing is we'd be back where we started. You'd have these games for 10, 15 hours, and it's like, what was that, deja vu? Because we had that back in the 360 and PS3 era, right? Like, overwhelmingly, so many games were in that time span. So again, I'm completely fine with that. Is the world, is society ready for that? I really think the answer is no. I think you have to charge less. And that's okay. Like, the thing is, you can probably get away with that. Making a $50 game that's 12 hours long, that is gonna sell, I'd say, because you know what also is gonna happen with those games? They're gonna be pretty darn creative. You're gonna have to convince people again that, like, you can do like, you can actually pull it off. But at the end of the day, I truly believe you can have some pretty creative stuff because it's not all that long of a game. You can take these risks in a short thing. You can only take the risks though if it doesn't cost a lot. But the thing is, if you make a game that's, say, 10, 15 hours long, a smaller, almost 1.5 style game like we got with Miles, well, these games take 2-3 years. Well, that is half the time as a big one, right? So that's half the budget. Maybe it's less than half the budget. Maybe you have a smaller team working on stuff like that. So, where am I going with this? Well, is this a Sony issue? Yeah, I mean, right now we're literally looking at Sony, but just in the gaming industry in general, again, I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to understand that I'm not the only freaking gamer, on planet Earth. I understand where live service is, and I understand the benefit, and even from an Xbox, why does Xbox want these? Why did they buy Activision Blizzard? Why did they get Bethesda? Why does Sony, why did they get Bungie? Why do they want Destiny? Why do they want to go into live service? Well, in some ways, I think that still is a big mistake, right? Because you don't want to change generally your entire ecosystem. You don't want to make developers that you literally built from the ground up to do single player, story-driven, your kind of style. You don't change them into something that they're not. I think that was the big mistake. That's always been my main complaint with it, right? But at the same time, I get it. Like, you need that money coming in, because if you don't have live service, well, you don't have that reoccurring money coming in. And if a game costs, $300 million, it takes 6 years to make. Well, that's a huge issue because, number one, everything I just said, and number two, God forbid that game fails. Because if that game fails, you are screwed. Like, you literally could lose 100, 150, you could probably lose half of that, right? You'd lose 100+ million. You think Sony is in, and it's not, again, Sony, anybody, you think anybody can just randomly take a hit with $100 million a game loses? There's very few. There is probably a few that could, but there's very few. So it is a Sony thing we're talking about right now, but I really want to look at it from the industry, and hopefully, we've done that in this video. So again, we've talked about live service and their place for this, the double A kind of thing, go double A, go shorter, go a little bit shorter in the game's length. Let's get back to true, like, I don't know, maybe I'm getting older and like I want to return to kind of like when I got into games. That's probably like that's a biasness, right? But ultimately, I do think that's we keep talking about how do you fix it, right? I don't want to just be one who like rambles I do that enough. I ramble just to ramble enough. How do you fix it? How do you actually do this? Because it's not sustainable. And I mean, I think we're kind of all on the same page with that, right? You cannot have games costing $300 million each game. You could absolutely, it's gonna break. It's eventually gonna completely collapse. You need to do something to fix that. And live service is a way. I guess there's probably other ways I'm not thinking of, but we've talked about live service and now shorter. Just go back to that. You'll have to charge less. And, again, you're relying on sales there as well. And this is all in the single player, I guess, space, right? Like more story driven stuff. It's all in that. But at the same time, I think you need to do it. You need games to come out quicker. You need games to come out where they don't cost literally you, the studio, doesn't cost you as much. And then, yeah, you charge less for it, and maybe it makes bank. And then guess what? Maybe you can fund other games. And that's really where I'm at. Like, I just want good games. I want everybody to kind of be at their best, right? Where all the best situation is kind of happening. And I don't think we're going that way. Like, I'm sorry. I really don't. I think there's a huge problem, and I think there's a bubble that's waiting to burst. And, when we talk about Ratchet and Clank, that's more about, hey, you can't take risks on smaller things. Well, what about this video's discussion, right? What about, well, hey, now you can't take risks on anything. You have to go with established stuff. But now established stuff costs too much, so you can't even really do that anymore. And you're taking a huge risk even with that. Because if it were to bomb, you would be destroyed. So, I don't know. I could keep going. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.